want to say hello to everybody out there. Thank you so much. Your participation is so much appreciated on our part, Urban Wine Club, and big appreciation to our two guests, Josh McDaniels, and this, I don't know who this guy is. Foti was trying to explain, Drew Bledsoe. Maybe we'll get to know him a little bit. But thank you so much for being here. Thank our guests for being with us. And I'm just going to turn it over to my co-host, Foti, and he's going to take it from there. And thank you, everybody, again.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you so much for participating and being with us tonight in this very special webinar. This is the most exciting webinar of our of our existence, I could say. Honored and so forth. We did have Drew and Josh with us at a previous podcast, which was super cool. And now to have this with them again is even more cooler. That there's a word for that as well, right, Ari? But for us,
way more cooler,
right? So we want you to definitely sit back, enjoy, get as much out of this as possible. We're gonna do a very simple format. If you have questions, we got the chat box going on through the whole webinar. Ari will moderate the questions. She'll turn them over to Josh and to Drew, and then towards the end of the latter part of our webinar, we can open up to different social questions and so forth. But without wasting any more time, Drew and Josh, thank you so much. Welcome to the segment. We're excited to learn more about what you're doing and about your wines. But why don't we talk about your journey into how you started your winery?
Yeah, no, that's a perfect setup. So I grew up in Walla Walla, Washington. It's where Josh is coming to us from today. I'm actually in Bend, Oregon. Josh is coming to you from right here. This is the winery. I think it's the visual aid right behind us, our beautiful winery up there in Walla Walla. But I grew up in Walla Walla, Washington. Beautiful little Norman Rockwell painting of a town in southeastern Washington, out in the rolling hills and wheat fields. It's a beautiful place to grow up. Wonderful place to grow up. It's, I tell people, I know growing up, I know that we had a key to our house. I just never knew where it was. Like we would literally go on vacation and not lock our house in our little town. It was that kind of place to grow up. Went off to play football at Washington State University for 3 years, and then elected to jump into the NFL draft. Was drafted by the Patriots back in 1993. Played 9 years for the Pats, 3 years for the Buffalo Bills, and my last 2 years with the Dallas Cowboys. Josh gets sick of hearing me say this, but I remind people all the time, if you ever get a chance to have somebody pay you a bunch of money to throw a football, you should definitely do that. It was awesome. I loved every second of it. It was really, really cool. But the cool thing for me was that while I was playing ball, my little hometown became known as one of the great wine grape growing regions of the entire world. And it was really fun for me because I could actually prove that. There were a lot of us in New England, that a lot of young football players that got into wine around the same time, and guys would come over to the house. I would tell them when they were coming over, like, hey, just bring a bottle of red wine. And so they would bring a bottle of red wine, invariably, something from Napa or Bordeaux, or every once in a while they get a little more adventurous, but it was primarily those two places. And we would do blind tastings at the house. We would put all the wines in paper bags, put them on the counter. We would taste through the wines and just simply pick which one we liked the best. Well, I would always throw something from Walla Walla into that mix, right? And so you got a bunch of these, fancy, expensive wines, and then you got some stuff from Walla Walla. And every time we did these blind tastings, we would unveil at the end what's what, and the Walla Walla wines would win. Every time, the Walla Walla wines would win. And that's really, I think, when that seed was planted, for me, that, hey, maybe after this football odyssey is done, I can go back to my hometown and start a wine business, but not just start a wine business with the intention of trying to make wines that can compete on a world stage against the best of the best. So my last year of football was 2006. We started Doubleback Winery in 2007. So, flash forward. Well, it has sort of been in the works a little bit prior to my actual retirement, but now flash forward 14 years from then, and it's sort of become a real thing. It's been a ton of fun. But I think Josh and I both are of the same mind. It's like, man, it's been really fun so far, but man, I can't wait to see what's around the next corner. I mean, we're continuing to improve and continue to expand. Just talked with Josh this morning. We're actually going to plant some Nebbiolo for the first time this next year. See if we can make Barolo and Walla Walla.
There you go.
But anyway, that's and as quickly as I can tell it, that's kind of my story. But Josh, I want you to share your story with these guys a little bit also.
Yeah, thanks, Drew, and thanks to both of you for having us back. It was fun the first time, so this time I've got high expectations. But so I'm Josh McDaniels. I'm the director of winemaking, and also got to grow up here, born and raised in Walla Walla, this beautiful little agricultural community. My dad actually worked at the cannery here in Walla Walla. And that's how, we got to know Gary Figgins, who is the owner of Leonetti Cellars. And that's where, I kind of weaseled my way into Leonetti when I was a young kid and worked my way up. My first day on the job was thrown behind a tractor with a picking crew. Mm-hmm. And I worked my way up from there. And that's where Drew and I met. And, I had, was pretty advantageous as a young kid. I started my own winery in high school and was pretty entrepreneurial minded, and found out that I really loved this industry and liked the farming and liked the winemaking and liked the sales and liked the business. And it was just this really cool industry that I got exposed to. But also as a young kid in Walla Walla, I was this big Drew Bledsoe fan, and Drew is the mythical godlike figure that every young boy aspired to be. And we got to kind of watch our childhood dreams lived out vicariously through him, and the hometown took a lot of great pride in what he was able to accomplish, and it was really cool to be able to come back and see him come back into Walla Walla with Doubleback. But I remember my first reaction now as a young wine geek when Drew announced he was going to start a winery in Walla Walla was, well, what the hell does Drew Bledsoe know about winemaking? And especially back in the mid 2000s, there were a lot of these, celebrity athlete projects that weren't very good at all. There were kind of endorsement deals that, you slapped your name on the bottle and put some mediocre juice in and sold it based on that. And it was really cool to see, the next few years of what Drew did. And, I really, credit him to I think really breaking that mold and the stigma around those types of wines, and actually creating a true, wine project that I, as a wine geek, would have wanted to start. Mm. And so he came out, he bought a piece of property that was incredible and developed that into a world-class vineyard, and hired my longtime mentor as his winemaker, and then continued, and maybe most importantly, continued to build a business that was based on the success of the wine quality. And so I was just really, really grateful and privileged to be able to take over with the 14 vintage. And it's been a ton of fun. And Drew nailed it. It's, every day, even after this long, every day we go to work. And I think we're more excited about the next day and what's to come than we were before. So it's been cool.
I think,
awesome to hear.
Gentlemen, I think I have to say that you really did, in my opinion, put Washington on the map for high quality production. And if I'm not mistaken, I think right out of the gate, you gentlemen have reached top 100 in the Wine Spectator at some point early on in the game. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was actually our first vintage, 2007. Yeah, we were top 100 wines in the world, our very first vintage, which was pretty cool.
That felt great.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's be honest. That competitive thing never really leaves you. And we did intend to try to make truly great wine. Wine critics and sports writers are kind of in the same bag to me. A lot of times I'd like to put them in a bag and beat them with a stick. But every once in a while they get it right. And but yeah, that was a great privilege. And since then we've been in top 100 wines in the world in a couple other publications a couple times. And so yeah, it's been pretty fun. I certainly cannot say that we were the ones that put Walla Walla on the map, though. We stand on some pretty broad shoulders of these. I don't know if they knew they were being visionaries when they started. I think they mostly just wanted to make some fermented grape juice. But guys like Gary Figgins that started Leonetti Cellars, and Rick Small that started Woodward Canyon, and the clubs that started Lea Cole. We stand on some pretty broad shoulders. So I certainly cannot claim that we put us there. But I will say without a doubt that Josh and I and our contemporaries of Walla Walla are continuing to try to raise the bar every single day. It's a royal we when we talk about the Walla Walla Valley. When we say we, it's there are a lot of us that are really trying to make great wine, and it's kind of cool to watch Josh's progression though from in a very short amount of time. I mean, he's still just barely out of diapers right now. He's only 31 or 32 years old, but in a very short amount of time has gone from the guy that was learning from Chris and Gary about how to do this, and now he's on the other side, and even at such a young age, he's the guy that's mentoring other people and sharing knowledge and really trying to help continue to build the quality in our entire valley, which is really, really cool.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of the valley, Drew or Josh, could you tell us what makes Walla Walla and Washington, for that part, such a unique place that produces great grapes and makes great wine?
I'll give you the broad strokes, and then Josh can distill it down with what we do specifically at Doubleback. When you think about the Northwestern United States, for those of you that have not spent much time out there, when you think about Seattle and Portland, you think about rain, right? It's Starbucks coffee and grunge music and rain, but the reason that there's all that rain on that side of the state is because all that moisture comes in off the Pacific Ocean. It hits the Cascade Mountain Range, which is basically a moisture dam that traps all that moisture on that side of the mountains. And when you get to our side of the mountains, it's more of a desert climate. So we get these long, hot summer days that are remarkably consistent. But then it also cools off really nicely at night, which is really important because you need those heat units to get ripe. But then because it cools off so nicely, we get longer hang time. We're able to maintain good natural acidity in the wine that gives it, that really gives red wine the backbone that we really pursue. That natural acidity is there. We've also been remarkably blessed with a relatively consistent growing climate year in and year out. We've had some outliers. 2011 was the coldest. 2015 was the hottest. 2018 was maybe the most perfect. That's what you're sipping on right now, growing seasons. But when you marry that with and this is where Josh should jump in and talk. But when you marry that with some really uniquely diverse growing areas within a relatively small valley, you get a chance to do some things that are really unique. But Josh, why don't you jump in and talk about where our estate vineyards are and how we approach putting those together.
Yeah, and it's cool to grow up. Leonetti was they were one of the first kind of really Washington, maybe even Northwest wineries to have estate vineyards. And so, I was in the cellar and I got to see, people think, Cabernet is Cabernet, right? And that's kind of the mentality, or Merlot is Merlot or whatever. But, you start tasting these different growing sites, across the valley, and, Cabernet is not Cabernet. It's completely different grown at Seven Hills Vineyard than it is grown at a Lust Vineyard or Mill Creek Uplands Vineyard. And so you started to develop this concept. Well, when you think about great wine, there's layers to wine, right? And there's complexity in wine. And, how do you build that in a wine in itself? And that was one of the ways that we've kind of approached that, is having these completely unique and different vineyard sites from each other. And then you bring those all into the same winery. And then all of a sudden, we always make that funny Bob Ross comment that, when Bob Ross is trying to paint a picture, he's got this color swatch with all these different colors, and then you create this masterpiece out of that. And that's really kind of how we approach winemaking. Is you're bringing in different aspects and different flavor profiles from each of these different vineyard sites, and then when you're in the cellar, you have a lot to choose from, and a lot of building and construction around those wines from there. And it's really cool. And it's actually really cool too, because right now we're in a unique time in wine where, technology's advancements has never been greater. And, people, especially these high production sites, can throw a lot of additives into their wines just to kind of cheat and create kind of these archetypal varieties and chase scores. But for us, we don't have to do any of that because we can kind of do it naturally just through blending across different vineyard sites and blocks within vineyards. So it's a really cool approach and something that we wholeheartedly believe in.
Nice.
Right.
So our folks for this experience have two of your wines that we're gonna taste together. We have the Healy Rosé, which is an interesting selection that we definitely want to talk about, and also the Doubleback, which we'll get into after as well. Anywhere you want to start, Josh and Drew, as far as getting into the wine?
Yeah, I'll start and kind of give you the broad strokes. We set out to make rosé for one very specific and a very important reason. My wife likes rosé, so and we're coming up on in May. It'll be 25 years. So I obviously broke the code, and I figured out if she's happy, then we're going to be fine. But when we set out to do it. We don't do anything in a half-hearted way. We don't do anything that is just haphazard, like, hey, well, that vineyard block's not performing well, we'll just make pink wine out of it. That's not how we approach anything that we do. Everything that we do has a purpose and has intention. And a lot of rosés that are made, particularly in the new world, are the opposite of that. They're accidental projects. They're a Sauvignon project where they're bleeding off juice of the red wine to try and concentrate the red wine and making pink wine out of that, or they have a vineyard block that's not performing, like, well, we'll just make sweet pink, pink wine out of that. That's not how we were going to approach it. We went out and sought out rosé from all over the world, all different styles. Rosé is really interesting, and I honestly really truly believe they need to change the classification of rosé. Because rosé is just pink wine, and you can make it from any red grape, and you can make it in any style. And we proved that when we did some benchmark tastings with some of the rosés from around the world. There were some of them that were sticky sweet, tasted like cotton candy, what we would classify as sorority wine. Now, my wife's a sorority girl, so I can say that without being too insulting. But you understand what I mean. It's just like it's just sweet wine. And then you went all the way to the other end of the spectrum. You go to France, and you have these ultra dry, very light colored expressions of rosé. And that was more the end of the spectrum that we gravitated toward. Was more kind of what they've been doing in France historically. So we picked a style, at least as an aiming point. It was funny, Josh, I was thinking about this. So the Healy name, it's my daughter's name, it's my wife's maiden name. But the reason that Healy name is important to our business is not because of my wife or my daughter. They're not on the call, so I can say that. It's because of my father-in-law, my wife's dad, Bob Healy, who was one of my favorite humans. Surprisingly had a great relationship with my father-in-law, which I know is not all that common. But Bob was one of these gifted people that couldn't taste wine, apparently, because we would go over to his house and I would bring a nice bottle of wine, and Bob would go grab some cheap, shitty bottle of wine they bought for $5. And he would bring those out and he would pour 2 glasses and he would mix them up. He was like, here, you can't even tell the difference. I'm like, well, yeah, Bob, I can tell by looking at them. And if I smell them, then I know which one I like. And the one that I don't like, I would probably not even sip on it if it was communion wine, Bob. And so we would shake our heads at each other and know the other guy was completely full of crap and go our separate directions. So now we have our second estate vineyard, which is called Bob Healy Vineyard. So Bob passed away before that happened. So it was 2 things. It was, number one, it was a tribute to a special man, but it was also me getting the last laugh because we're now making fancy, expensive wine with Bob Healy's name on the vineyard. So I win. And he knows that, and I know he appreciates it. But I was thinking about the other day, Josh, because when we were talking about Healy, when we were trying to figure out what to name the rosé, it was actually Josh's wife Kim that suggested we call it Healy. He said, it's a cool kind of feminine name that fits with pink wine, and so that's how we came up with the name. And then I basically told Josh what I always tell him: make it great or you're fired. And he's still working for us. But Josh, talk about what you did to try to make this rosé that we're really proud of.
Yeah, it was that's a funny story, but so far I'm going to keep trying to do that. But the important thing to remember is trying to find not necessarily sites, like pockets of the valley where they're not necessarily great, like Cabernet sites. And so we went out and found really cool sites that don't really get ripe. And I've learned this. It's kind of like the antithesis of Cabernet winemaking, and it took a while for me to believe in it. But man, they're absolutely the best rosé sites. So we find these really late ripening sites that's all Syrah that's in the blend. We pick them, like Cabernet, we're picking anywhere from 25 bricks to 28 bricks. And we pick rosé, we're picking like 21 to 23 bricks. Almost like champagne. And, so lots of acid, hardly any color in the wines, and just really a different flavor and aromatic profile than you get in any red wine. So we bring that into the winery. We throw it straight into the press. So it's just whole cluster right into the press. So basically gets zero skin contact time. Comes out really bright. It almost looks like white wine when it comes out. And then we put that in tank overnight, let it settle, and then put it into stainless steel and French oak. But there is one lot that we always do with skin contact time, trying to develop, again, like we mentioned with Cabernet, we're trying to develop complexity. And just because the cool thing that, like what Drew mentioned, I think earlier, was just because we're making rosé doesn't mean we're not going to try to make great rosé. And so we'll do a couple lots with skin contact time, trying to develop different characteristics from that lot, and then we'll blend that in with the other lots to try to develop those layers and complexity. That's where some of that color comes from, and also I think some of the textural development in the wine. But we put this wine, like half of it almost goes into stainless steel tanks, and that really keeps the wine fresh and crisp and clean. And then the other half, and I've done more and more neutral French oak barrels. And I actually, as long as you have a lot of acid and low alcohol levels, those barrels really just add mouthfeel, and it's just a really cool blend of the two. And so it's this wine's been a ton of fun. And Drew and I get to do one of our first dinners in a long time tomorrow night in Seattle, and having a rosé in our dinner lineup's actually been really, really personally and selfishly fun for us, because instead of eating like 3 courses of steak, we actually get like some fish or a salad course, which is really nice. So,
Nice.
We get a little bit selfish in that regard, but it's fun.
Awesome. Well, we definitely want our guests to please, as we're going through this, I'm sure they're tasting the rosé as we're speaking. They can, tell us their comments in the chat box as we're going on. But yeah, for me, like, I drink tons of rosé, and we had this conversation earlier that, we never thought we'd find ourselves drinking, pink wine, as you mentioned earlier. But it definitely suits the purpose. And the Healy Rosé is one of our favorites, not because we're on here, but it's so well made. And like you mentioned, mouthfeel, textures, flavors, balance, it's all there. So great job, gentlemen. Yeah, so please, any comments, please put them in the chat box for us. And then any last thoughts about the rosé before we move into the Doubleback?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that I have come to appreciate more and more about what Josh does with our wines, sensory perception of wine. It's not just what you taste. It's not just what you smell. Texture is a really important sensory component of wine. And we'll talk about this more with Doubleback as we get into what Josh does with that. But making sure that you're touching more senses than just taste and smell actually it completes the full experience with wine. And that texture actually is a really important component of that as you experience wine. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about some of those the steps that Josh has to go through to do that. Yeah, it just makes it a lot of fun, because it just the full experience is deeper than just what you taste.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent.
Can I read one of the comments we just got? So I think this is
We're
so
leading to this.
it's it's funny for Drew, but at the end it's a compliment. So this person wrote, I was thinking Drew
I don't even want, I'm not sure I want to hear that. This sounds like a backhanded compliment. Like, you know, for a football player, Drew's not that stupid or something along those lines. You know?
Well, you be the judge. So I was thinking, Drew Bledsoe, how good will this cab really be? But damn, it's good. So I just wanted to say that comment there.
So I will tell you this: when we, you know, when we started, had a lot of my old football buddies and a lot of friends that would buy the wine because they were obligated to, because, you know, it's like, hey, we're buddies, so I got to support my buddy. Like, hey, you know, Ty Law releases the vodka, well, I'm going to go buy his vodka. You know, we're friends. But I would get that exact compliment from a bunch of guys. They're like, hey, you know, the wine's actually really good. I'm like, well, dude, thanks for the low expectations. Thanks for thinking that it was going to be shitty and being surprised that it was actually good. But I did get my little piece that actually made me feel really good about it, because Chris Figgins, who's our good buddy and was Josh's mentor as a winemaker growing up, and has made amazing wines at Leonetti for his family for a long time. We had our first party where we were drinking the first vintage of Doubleback before it had been released. And I happened to be standing next to Chris, and his mom came over to him, and Chris has been making these super highly regarded wines at Leonetti for a bunch of years, you know. And she walked over. I happened to be standing next to Chris, and his mom, Nancy, walked over and said, "Christopher, this is actually really good." And Chris looked at his mom and was like, "Mom, did you think I was going to make shit wine after I've been making all this stuff?" It's yeah. Anyway, so it was kind of funny. So I liked it because Chris had to hear that before I had to hear it from my friends. But as we start to talk about Doubleback, I don't know if you guys want to lead the conversation, but if we start to talk about Doubleback, we'll talk about that perception and what that means.
Yeah, definitely. So
there's another comment. Not a big rosé guy, but this is awesome. Great nose, love it. Cab is as good as some of the best California cabs I've had. So that was very nice. And on one more, same. I typically hate rosé, but the Healy is certainly doable. So, you know,
love it. That's what we like to hear.
You know, we're in this renaissance where I think we're converting a lot of drinkers from their typical whites and reds into rosé. So the fact that, you know, we're turning people on one glass at a time is huge for us. But moving now into the Doubleback, and I'm sure you get this question all the time, Drew, you know, Doubleback, and how did you come up with that name, Doubleback? Is there any reference to football when it comes to Doubleback?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because it actually ties directly into the conversation that we just had. You know, one of the advantages that I've had in the wine business is that I am my target demographic. I am my own wine buyer, right? We've collected wine, we love wine from all over the world, and you know, but and still do. By the way, you know, we still actually, maybe more now than ever. Josh and I had a really great experience this last week. We had a business meeting with our partner on our wine bar we're about to open in Seattle, and we were just going to do a little photo shoot and maybe have a couple glasses of wine. And I don't even really, Josh, want to know how many bottles were sitting on the table when we were done. But it was sort of an embarrassing amount. But the cool thing was that Greg, who's our partner, is world's youngest ever master sommelier, he's forgotten more about wine than I will ever know in my life. And he just kind of kept pulling, well, we should try this one from, you know, this obscure vineyard in Italy, and we should try this one from this is one that nobody can get into the United States from the Rhone Valley, and just and then he brought out this Hermitage that just blew our minds. So we're literally just we are still wine geeks, and for me that's an advantage. But when it comes to our business as a wine collector and a wine consumer, I always discounted celebrity brands. You know, like, look, this is wine. This is not a candy bar. This is not a sports drink. It's not an endorsement deal. The wine should speak for itself first. And so when it came time to figure out what name we were going to put on the bottle, did not want it to be football wine. Football player makes wine. We actually really wanted to get away from that as much as we could. You know, and people have asked, okay, Doubleback, is that football? You got quarterback, halfback, fullback, Doubleback. Like, no, that's not it. That's not what it is. We wanted to make sure that the story was an authentic story, and it really is a true story, that I grew up in Walla Walla. I got to go play football. I was blessed to have that amazing career and just loved every second of it. And then after that, doubled back and came back home. So it's a story it's a story of returning home. And you know, everything that we do within our business is authentic. And you know, there's I mean, you know, we are in sales, so you know, we can maybe like we can flesh out a story here and there, maybe take some artistic license, but everything that we do in our business, authenticity is an important thing to us, and that's really what it is. And that's where the name came from. The other thing that goes along with that was style. What style of wine we're going to make. You know, when you think about, you know, an athlete that gets into wine, particularly a football player, you know, you think, okay, well, these are going to be football wines. They're going to be just these big, you know, super high alcohol, punch you in the face, you know, super extracted fruit, 200% new American oak, you know, just massive wines. That's not what we wanted to do. That's not what I like to drink anymore, although it was when I first started. It's not what our valley does best. Our valley does balance and elegance and sophistication better than it does just brute force. So we really also kind of wanted to flip stylistically that perception on its head. It's still Cabernet. Like, this is not a, you know, wine that you know, that's going to just go hide in the corner. You know, it's still a big wine. But what we hope to achieve, and what I think Josh has done an amazing job with, you know, for us with these wines, is that we want balance. We want elegance. We want wines that get more interesting the more time you spend with them. You know, the thing is, as I started to grow and learn more about wine, the thing that I started to gravitate toward were wines that got more interesting the more time you spent with them. You know, those big obvious wines that I liked when I first started getting into wine, it was great because it was obvious. You know, that's big fruit, that's big vanilla oak, this, you know, and I actually liked a lot of alcohol back then. Now I'm getting older, you know, I want some finesse. I want something that's going to reveal itself slowly over the course of a meal. I actually like lower alcohol now because that way I can drink more wine. But it's and I'm going to throw it to Josh here in a second, but this deal that we dealt with this last year, everything was shut down. There were you know, there were obviously a lot of devastating effects to it, but there also, for me on a personal level, there were some really cool pieces of it. And one of those was that I actually got to spend more time at the winery during harvest and during crush this last year. You know, in previous years, I'm always chasing my kids' sports, and you know, I was coaching football for a bunch of years, and I just didn't get to spend as much time up there. But one of the things that struck me being there was that making wines that have balance, subtlety, elegance, nuance is a much more complicated process. And being there and witnessing on a daily basis the level of detail and the amount of minutia that Josh and the team have to track in order to make wines that express themselves this way, it's a much harder endeavor than just harvesting overripe fruit, slapping it into big American oak with high alcohol and you know, making these massive wines. To make wines that have elegance to them is a much harder process. But Josh, why don't you jump in and talk a little bit about how you approach making wines with this kind of profile?
Yeah, and you know, a lot of it reverts back to the farming, and you know, we talked about our estate vineyard sites earlier in the conversation, and you know, that elegant style is somebody, you know, made a comment about Piedmont and loving Piedmont, and both Drew and I love, you know, big Barolo fans, and you know, and that elegant word.
Jumping in for a sec, Josh. We just for the Barolo fan out there, we just talked this morning. We've ordered some. We're going to plant some Nebbiolo next year at Walla Walla. We are such huge Barolo fans, and we just have to know if we can do it great at Walla Walla. We have to know, and if we can, then I'll die a happy man.
Well, can we get a shot of at least trying it when it's ready?
Yeah, we'll let you know in about 20 years.
Nice.
Anyway, sorry, Josh, I cut you off, but go.
No, I mean, exactly along those lines of Barolo, you think about what that wine is they're very elegant wines, right? But they're huge. They take a lot of time, especially the kind of the traditional winemakers. They take 10, 20, 30, 40 years to really come around and be drinkable. But you would describe them as being very elegant too. And so that's kind of a lot of that mindset that we've taken with Doubleback and some things that we've tried to create. Maybe not quite as far as being as big as some of the Barolo wines that we've fallen in love with, but and to even go further, a lot of that goes back to the vineyard sites. Our original estate site, McQueen, it's high up, it's on a ridgeline of fractured basalt. It's actually a tectonic plate that buckled up and created this ridgeline that we're planted right on the top of. So we have north and south facing slopes up there. It's very windy, so the wind has eroded all the soil. And so we get a lot of, because of that stress, we get a lot of tannin and acid, out of those wines. And, McQueen probably more than any of our vineyard sites reminds me a lot of kind of that profile of Barolo. But then, you go down and in the Rocks district, for example, where we have our Lafort vineyard, it's all rolled river rock. It looks like exactly like the Chateauneuf du Pape if you take a picture and you compare photos. And it's flat, and because of that, it's a little warmer. We got a little bit more energy in the vines, and the tannin profiles out of there are just super sexy and lush and plush and higher pH wines. And so the ability to go after these styles in the winery is purely because of the vineyard sites. And part of what we do out in the vineyards that we should talk about is our sustainability practices. Yes. And it's a big word in wine, and it's probably a big word in like food in general. And but I think it's also misunderstood in a lot of ways. And so we've kind of had to like define it for ourselves internally, and then kind of commit to those definitions of our own. And basically, it's we're running short on the clock here, so I'll try to make this quick. But basically, the first one is we're trying to create safe environmental practices. We have a lot of biodiversity plantings in our vineyards where we create beneficial ecosystems for organisms that we have balanced, so we don't have to spray pesticides. We do simple things that we like to show off when our customers are in our tasting rooms, that we mow every other vineyard row, and just that one small practice, we take our diesel usage down by 50%, and our soil compaction is reduced by 50%. Wow. So things that lead up and add up over time to major impacts on the environment. And then the second piece is a big one that's newer to us, and that's the people aspect. And it's been a really cool evolution to watch over the years. But we started our own farming company 3 years ago. And so, our crew, we have 12 people now in our crew. They're some of the highest paid people in the crews in the Northwest. They have all full-time health insurance. They have full-time retirement benefits. And rather than, kind of the traditional route of farms, laying people off after 8 or 9 months this growing season, we actually keep them employed all year. So they actually, get to come in and work in the winery. And we're actually kind of developing an ecosystem of people too, which is really cool.
Amazing.
Last one, and I'll just touch on it quickly, is the business sustainability practice. And we understand that we have to make every decision within the company as a sustainable decision, because if we don't have the money to do to operate the business, we don't get to do the first 2 points. We don't get to treat people well, and we don't get to treat the environment well. So it's just a really cool thing that we've practiced a lot, and it really makes a big impact on Doubleback and something we believe in.
That's amazing.
The cool thing, just to piggyback, with Josh leading this team and with our team doing such an amazing job for us, I get to take credit for a lot of stuff, which I really, really enjoy, by the way. But one of the coolest pieces of the sustainability efforts that we make is that, first of all, when we brush our teeth in the morning, we can be proud of the guy that's, looking at us, but equal to that, it's actually good business to be sustainable. We grow better fruit by being sustainable. Our team, Pedro, who's the foreman of our farming crew for us, he actually planted McQueen Vineyard back in 2007. It's his favorite vineyard in the valley. They love these vines like they're their own, and because of that, they take better care of our vineyards. That produces better fruit, allows us to produce a better product. And so, we would do these things anyway because they're the right thing to do. But at the end of the day, it's also better business to take care of the environment. It's better business to take care of your people. And that's why it makes me just, so proud to have my name on the business that Josh is leading for us, that, we're doing the right thing. But the right thing is also paying us back, which is really, really cool.
Right. Well, for us here, gentlemen, the proof is in the glass. Cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers, guys. Thank you. And it's, I will tell you this, I know we got to wrap up here pretty soon, but, every once in a while I get to have these cool moments, with our wines. For me on a super personal level, both Josh and I, whenever we're tasting our wines, we're almost always just being critical. We're like, okay, we're trying to figure out what's wrong with the wine. We're trying to pick it apart. How could we be better? But every once in a while I'll be at an event and there'll be a lot of wines being poured and I'll just be walking around with a glass, like today. And I'll just have a sip and I'm not really paying attention. Like, holy shit, that's really good wine. What is that? Oh, that's ours. And it's like, it's one of these, like every once in a while you're like, oh man, I actually get to drink our own stuff for enjoyment rather than for criticism. And it's a really cool moment to know at the end of the day, what we set out to do is still something that makes me on a very personal sensory level, makes me really, really happy. And that's with our business, that's our vision statement for the entire business. We try to create happiness for ourselves and our customers. And if we do that, then we're a success.
Well, Drew, keep it going because it's definitely working, at least on our end here. Ari, do you want to, for the last 5 minutes, maybe open up any to our special guests that are with us tonight?
Sure. Just very quickly, Drew has to go in like maybe 5 minutes, maybe even less. But if you guys want to open up your cameras, keep yourselves muted, just because if we have a lot of people unmuted, it gets a little hectic, and just use the chat box and then I'll unmute you if you want to ask a question personally. But we have very little time, so
yeah, definitely.
Now, while we're waiting, the Transcend the Bullshit poster over Josh's shoulder, that was I gave that to him. It's a copy of one that hangs in my office that my grandfather had hanging in his office when he was in politics in the state of Washington. Director of the Department of Agriculture, director of the Department of Fish and Game. And when he passed away, my grandmother let each of us grandkids pick one thing out of the house, and I picked the Transcend the Bullshit poster that used to hang in my grandpa's office, and gave Josh a copy of it, because I feel like that's a pretty damn good mantra for life. If you can transcend the bullshit, you can live a pretty good life.
Love it.
So I see Mike Harrington and Amin. Do you guys want me to unmute so you can ask a question?
Sure, do it.
Let me see, Mike Harrington, and then we could get to Amin.
Yeah, I'm all set. I don't have any questions here.
You just want to see our pretty faces? All right, Amin, do you have a question? Let me unmute you.
We just wanted to know what Drew Bledsoe's favorite touchdown was.
Oh man, the good thing about getting older is I only remember the touchdowns, not the interceptions, which is great. That selective memory is great. But there were a few favorites. In college, just touchdown pass I threw to Philip Bobo against the Washington Huskies in a big rivalry game in our state in the snow game, which was really, really fun. In 94, we came back to beat the Minnesota Vikings after being down 20-3 and hit Kevin Turner in the corner of the end zone to win in overtime, which was really, really cool. And then when the year that I got hurt, that disrespectful backup quarterback, that Brady kid, came in for me. He was at least kind enough to sprain his ankle in the AFC Championship game, and I got to come in and help us beat the Steelers to go to the Super Bowl.
Patton.
Yeah, David Patton in the corner of the end zone. That one was pretty fun because it was an exciting year as a teammate, but a bloody year as a person, and it was really cool to actually get to come in and play in that game.
Awesome.
All right. Bill Marcotte, do you have a question?
My wife does.
I have a comment, actually.
Comment.
Sure.
I know. Sorry. I just want to thank you, first of all, for this wonderful experience. And I'm happy that you are from an area of the country that I liked what you said about the wine always showing up as a top wine when you brought it from your area. So you were able to, I think, establish that in your area of the country, and we're enjoying your wine tremendously.
Love it, Drew.
We
Love
really
it.
are. And you're
Thank you.
all of you, and I can't wait to come out and meet Josh.
We're gonna
too.
come out, yeah.
Someday, maybe we will.
Yeah.
We like Josh McDaniels, the offensive coordinator, but we like Josh McDaniels, the winemaker, much better. And Drew, we love you. Great wine, awesome wine.
Well, hey, that's actually a great segue, because we would love to have you come see us. I'm batting 1,000 so far. When I've recommended the Walla Walla Valley and people come see us, it becomes their favorite wine region to visit, at least in the U.S. It's this really cool time and place. It's still just a little farm town, but there are somewhere between 130 and 150 wineries. And most of those are making truly world-class wines that are not homogenous like you would find in Napa, for example. They're really expressions of where they are. But the food scene has followed. The restaurants are amazing.
Okay.
There's good golf. But the cool thing is, the good thing is, when you show up and you pull into downtown Walla Walla, you may have a Ferrari parked on one side. On the other side, there's going to be a dirty old pickup truck when you park in downtown. And you're going to walk in, you're going to have an amazing meal. And as you're sitting there, the farmer with the dirt on his boots that drove in the old truck actually has more money than the guy in the Ferrari, but you just are never going to know that, right? Nice. So it's a really cool time and place to come visit. And if you do come out, these guys can share with you our information.
Yes.
If you do come out, call us first. Obviously, we want you to come see us, but also our team does a really great job of recommending where to stay, where to eat, what other wineries to go to. They have this, they have it nailed, so that you've got your inside person when you come to Walla Walla.
Awesome. Drew, before you go, we have
one
quick question from David.
That's
a quick question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Drew, I just wanted to say thank you for everything tonight. We loved you as a quarterback. I really enjoyed. I had to listen to that game on the radio because we couldn't sell at the stadium back in the day. But I remember you set the record for attempts that day and for completion. So really appreciate everything you did there. I appreciate everybody tonight. We were able to get a lot of our clients and friends of the firm on tonight, thanks to Fody. So thank you very much for setting this up. We appreciate you taking the time, and thanks for the great wines.
Yeah. And if I can just include that, David, thank you so much. We want to thank 12 Point Management for being a part of this tonight and your support for this webinar. We truly do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys. I've actually got to jump.
All right.
I'm actually, he's not really my boss anymore, but my next one, I've got to go talk to a bunch of Mr. Kraft's good friends.
Drew, this won't be the last time. We're definitely going to have you back again. We definitely want to do this one more time, if not one more, but many times. But we'll definitely schedule something in the near future with you.
I'm pretty busy, but maybe Josh can jump on with you. No, we love you guys, man. We so appreciate you guys introducing us to real wine fans. We do a lot of these things, and a lot of them are kind of corporate things. You guys attract real wine fans, and that's who we love to talk to.
Awesome.
We love football fans. Don't get me wrong. When we love all of our, but when we get to actually talk to fellow wine geeks, that's what we really, really like to do. So thank you guys so much. We look forward to the next one.
Thank you,
Likewise.
guys.
so much.
You.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All
you.
right. We want to say a special thank you to Drew Bledsoe and Josh McDaniels, and we want to thank everybody out there who joined us and who sipped on the wine and enjoyed it. And we really appreciate you guys being part of this with us. And stay tuned for the next one. We have a lot of cool wine people in the pipeline, and we definitely want to bring Drew and Josh back. So stay tuned for that. And thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Do that.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thank you.